Ever since I moved out 20 years ago, I've made sure to visit my mother regularly, especially on Mother's Day. My dad passed away when I was in school, and most of my siblings rarely visit her. I don't blame them though. None of them could ever be worse to her than our youngest brother. He never moved out and made a life for himself because he never cared about school or getting a job. Even when he did try to work for a few days at a handful of different minimum wage jobs, he'd inevitably end up getting fired by his third shift due to his extreme behavioral issues. Our family did everything for the guy, but he always returned our kindness by picking fights, stealing from us, or running away. The only times I voluntarily used violence against him were the times he got into physical altercations with our mother. Despite being such a useless sack of shit, nothing was ever good enough for him. We might have never had a father, but he's the deadbeat scumbag that tore our family apart. A sense of dread planted itself in me the moment I realized that he was going to be living with my mother and leeching off her for the rest of her life. And every time I thought about either of them, it grew stronger. Even though I hated my brother's guts, I still visited them at least once a month. Over the years, the condition of the household only became worse. Every single time I walked in the door, I would hear my brother screaming at my mother about something totally silly. Whether it was about the litter boxes or groceries, it didn't matter. He would blow up about anything at a moment's notice, and there was never any end to his rage. As my mother got older, my brother took more and more control over her. I used to think I could still take him in a fight like I did when we were younger. Every time I visited, yet more unhinged than the previous visit, the tension between us grew as I gradually realized that my little brother wasn't so little anymore. He was a mentally sick incel with infinite pent-up rage and the strength to seriously hurt somebody with ease. He took out his self-isolating misery on his mother, and anyone who got close to him would get dragged down to his level. I started visiting less. I was afraid. He would stare at me whenever I was over, trying to find some tiny reason to get mad at me and pick a fight. My mother was a shell of her former self. All the control she ever had over her son was gone. He was the one in control. One time, I visited for the first time in a while and nearly got stabbed at the door by my brother. He was furious with me, claiming that I was trying to make him homeless. That's when I realized he had been listening to our phone calls, and that's the last time I visited my mother for almost a year. However, I knew I had to check on her. Mother's Day was coming up in a few days, so I called to let her know I was planning to visit. She mentioned she was going to make dinner, but before I could say I'd come hungry, my brother snatched the phone out of her hand and hung up. I knew it was not going to be a pleasant visit, but I still intended to be there. On Mother's Day, I went to her house and knocked on the door. There was no answer after several knocks, so I opened the door, expecting to have my brother jump out and run me off the property. But to my surprise, it seemed like nobody was home. All the lights were off, and the house was shockingly quiet. I hadn't heard the house so calm since before my little brother was born, but it was the opposite of comforting. I stepped inside and called out to my mother without an answer. "Mom, are you home?" Then, I turned on the foyer lights, and that's when my worst nightmare appeared. I saw my brother crouched on the kitchen counter, completely soaked in blood. He held a knife in his hand and was smiling like an utter psycho. For a few seconds, I was speechless, struggling to speak. Finally, I managed to get the words out. Where's Mom?" "We need a new one. The old one's back there." He then pointed his thumb over his shoulder to the backyard. I immediately ran through the front door and went around the side of the house to the backyard. The pool was stained red. My mother was floating face down in the center, drenched in blood. In that instant, I broke down into hysterical tears right next to the pool. I barely had enough control over my body to take my phone out of my pocket and call the police. I was on the phone with them, sobbing and trying to tell them what happened when my brother came outside. As soon as I saw him, I ran back to my car and locked myself in. Minutes later, a swarm of cops arrived and subdued my brother, putting him in handcuffs and stuffing him into the backseat of a cop car. Ever since then, he's acted like he has no idea what's going on, as if that's going to convince anyone that he's innocent. He keeps saying that it wasn't our mom who was in the pool, and that it was a completely different woman. To this day, I'm not sure if my brother was lying, or if he genuinely had mental issues. I just hope he rots in jail and his cellmates give him a taste of what he did to our mother. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a man in Las Vegas, Nevada, who allegedly took out his mother on Mother's Day and then threw her body in a backyard swimming pool. The culprit was a 49-year-old man named Aaron Cooney. The victim's name was Linda Cooney. The incident occurred on Sunday morning at the residence, where officers responded to the gruesome scene. Aaron Cooney's brother said the alleged killer lived with his mother and several others in the residence. When arrested, the defendant was apparently in an advanced state of denial, or perhaps something else entirely, saying stuff like, "That's not our mom anyways, we need a new one." The brother who spoke to law enforcement reportedly said that he asked Aaron where their mother was before finding her in the pool. The violence, however, did not seemingly come out of the blue, the brother allegedly told police. Months earlier, the grieving son said Aaron had threatened their mother with a knife during an argument about cats, and in multiple other occasions. The defendant has insisted on his innocence, stating that he wasn't a murderer. Aaron has since been sentenced accordingly.
This happened about 2 decades ago when I was homeless. It happened around a time I got sick with the flu from panhandling and hitchhiking all around Sacramento. Pretty soon, I got a huge break. I found out about an old lady named Dorothy. She ran a boarding house for people who were homeless or mentally ill. Everyone I talked to spoke very highly of her and said that she was like a mother to them. It was rumored that guests would come and go, but I just alluded it to people being claustrophobic over time from sharing the house with so many guests. The day I decided to check in and finally meet this Dorothy woman, I was greeted by her at the door. That's when I saw the creepiest old lady I'd ever seen. The woman immediately took me in and gave me a space in a room close to a bathroom after I told her I was sick with a stomach bug. She only asked that I did my best not to spread it to other tenants. I remember the place looking pretty run down, but it was better than being on the street. The first night I stayed was fine. I made a few friends and had a decent sleep despite not feeling well. The next morning, Dorothy made the guests breakfast. She passed around plates of food to everyone, but when she came to me, I had to decline. I explained that I was still too ill to eat, but I could tell she took it as an insult with the look she was giving me. At dinner time, I had to decline again, but she was insistent that I eat, saying I wouldn't get better if I didn't eat anything. I repeated what I said about not physically being able to eat, but it was like she didn't understand. She got upset and kept taking my refusals as insults. As expected, when I didn't eat the breakfast she made me the next morning, she was furious. She started screaming at me in front of the guests. She even threatened to kick me out. However, I found her insistence that I eat very strange, but in a way, it was very motherly. However, it was nothing compared to how she acted at night. There was one night when I was having a lot of trouble sleeping because of my sickness. It was roughly 1 or 2 in the morning when I noticed something bizarre. I remember seeing Dorothy come into the bedroom and start petting multiple guests' heads like they were dogs. I found this rather disturbing that she would do such a thing to strangers. None of the people she petted ever noticed. They didn't even stir. It was like they were in the deepest sleep of their lives. A few minutes later, Dorothy would leave the room, go into the backyard, and start doing yard work. I peeked out a window a few times to see what she was doing, but it was too dark to see anything. The best I could figure was that she was gardening, but it baffled me that she would do that sort of thing in the middle of the night. A few days into my stay, some of the tenants were talking about doing something nice for Dorothy for Mother's Day. I hadn't realized that it was the next day, but I also wasn't keen on doing anything much for her. If anything, I might have finally been able to eat some of her food. Unfortunately, I never got the chance. I received a rude awakening that night which cut my stay short.
There's my poor little sick piggy. There. Mama's gonna take care of you and make everything better. Forever.
What the hell do you want?
Shh! They're sleeping.
Why were you petting my head?
Because Mommy loves you, darling.
I don't care. Stay away from me.
But you need to eat something, sweetie. It's been days.
I don't want anything to eat. Just leave me alone.
How about just a cookie?
No, I'm okay.
Come on. Here comes the airplane.
No, I don't want it. You're crazy.
Happy Mother's Day, bitch! Now eat the damn cookie. It's good for you.
What the hell is wrong with you? Just get off me.
Once I was out of the house, I made it to a local gas station and alerted the clerk to call the police. I knew something weird was happening in there, and I was right. It turns out that when the police searched her house, they uncovered her whole operation. Dorothy had been taking advantage of the homeless and mentally ill, luring them into her house with the promise of shelter and meals, only to poison them with her food and bury their bodies in the backyard. It was all a ploy to keep collecting their Social Security checks after they passed. She was later convicted for her heinous actions. Ever since then, Mother's Day has left a bad taste in my mouth. That awful wench betrayed motherhood altogether. The story was inspired by a horrifying Mother's Day occurrence regarding a woman named Dorothea Puente, who ran a boarding house for vulnerable people in Sacramento, California. Eventually, it emerged that she had executed some of her guests, targeting those who had mental health issues or were homeless. What's tragic was how the guests looked and referred to Dorothea as a mother figure. It was revealed that Dorothea would sedate the guests, execute them, and then bury them in the backyard before continuing to cash in their Social Security checks. Ultimately, she got caught and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The day I regret most in my life is the day that I moved out of my mom's house. It's not that I wasn't ready or anything. I was old enough, and I'd just gotten a job that paid pretty well. The only problem was that it was too far away for me to stay at the house. That day, I was sure that I was doing the right thing. My mom was a single parent, and she already had to take care of my two younger brothers. She needed help with the bills, and I thought that with my new job, I would be able to make things easier for her. But now, I wonder, if I had stayed, maybe things would have been different. My dad died a few years earlier due to complications, and once he was gone, my mom had to start taking care of us and living off welfare. It was hard, but I did my best to help out since I was the oldest. Still, once Dad was gone, she became an emotional wreck. It's like she wasn't all there anymore. Some days, I'd barely even recognize her. It almost seemed to get worse once I moved out. Every time I visited, she seemed to have gone further off the deep end. At first, it was just random phases of depression where she would lay around the house all day and barely say a word. Then, she started to become more violent and angry. The scariest thing, though, was how she would post all kinds of pictures on social media portraying her to be happy with the boys. If I ever saw her in person, I could barely get her to smile, but in her posts she made herself look like the world's best mom. It varied from simple things like, "I had so much fun painting with the boys today," to really over-the-top captions like, "My lifeline, my heartbeat, my everything." Once, she posted a picture of herself with the boys and wrote, "I don't think I would know how to smile, laugh, or love if it wasn't for them." And yet that same day I visited and found her screaming at the boys. That was the whole problem with her posts. I knew she was full of shit. Anyone scrolling through her Facebook would think she was a loving mother, but I knew the truth. She was becoming a monster. Every day she became more and more psychotic, and she would often yell and scream at the boys and even at me when I came over. One particularly rough day, she had done nothing but scream at all of us until she finally stormed off to her room and slammed the door like a child. Then, a few minutes later, she posted an older picture of her with the boys and captioned it, "Even on our bad days, they shower me with love. Always together, never apart. 3 souls, 1 heart." I began to really question her sanity after that. The problem was that I couldn't be there super often due to work, so I had to let a neighbor check in on them from time to time. I was more concerned for the boys than I was for her. I was worried that she would forget to feed them or something. Part of me thought that I should call protective services on her, but I was afraid that it would just make her snap. I tried to visit more frequently, but it was too tolling. Anytime I was there, I felt like I was responsible for everything. When I combined that with my job, It was so difficult to find the right balance between visiting enough and not overworking myself. I did the best that I could. When Mother's Day was coming up, I of course decided that I would visit. The day before, my mom posted another picture of her with the boys and wrote, "Every day is Mother's Day in my world." I hoped it meant that things were going better. I actually became excited to celebrate Mother's Day after that. I thought that it might not be so bad after all, and I went to sleep that night happy that I would get to see my family the next day. I got a phone call in the middle of the night. It woke me up suddenly, and I looked at the time. It was very late, around 2 or 3 in the morning. I was confused why someone would be calling me at this time, so I checked to see who it was. It was from the neighbor. I knew it had to be bad news. There was no other reason why they would call so late. Hello?
You need to come to the house right away. It's your mother. She did something really bad to the boys. No.
I couldn't believe what was happening. The neighbor had said that he heard loud bang sounds and immediately went to check on the house. And when he got there, it was already too late. That psycho had already taken out the boys. I got to the house as fast as I could. I don't even know how I had made it there without wrecking. I had never driven so fast before. When I walked into the house, I found my mom crouched down and curled up into a corner of the room.
Where are they? What did you do, you bitch? What kind of Mother's Day is this?
The neighbor immediately called the cops and my mother was arrested. I've been traumatized by Mother's Day ever since. I can't get that picture of her horrific smile and the boys out of my mind.
Every day is Mother's Day in my world.
The story was inspired by a horrific Mother's Day incident regarding a woman named Tiffany Lucas, who allegedly took out 2 of her young ones after consistently posting about her love for them on Facebook. The victims were 2 males named Jaden and Maurice. A neighbor found the victims on a bed inside their Shepherdsville, Kentucky home. The victims were rushed to the hospital but unfortunately didn't make it. Shortly after the boys were found, Lucas, 32, reportedly collapsed on the lawn of the home. Just weeks before the occurrence, Tiffany would share photos and videos from outings with the victims. She would share photos on Facebook of the trio dressed up as Star Wars characters on Halloween. In another recent post sharing photos of the victims, she wrote, "Had so much fun painting with the boys." On May 27th, she captioned a photo of herself with the victims saying, "My lifeline, my heartbeat, my everything." Weeks before that, she wrote on her Facebook page saying, "Every day is Mother's Day in my world. I don't think I would know how to smile, love, or survive if it wasn't for them. Even on our bad days, they shower me with an abundance of love. Always together, never apart. 3 souls, 1 heart." In another heartbreaking post from July 29th, 2022, Lucas wrote, "My sons won't doubt their mom ever in life. Hashtag breaking generational curses." Darrell Howard, the older brother of the victims, has spoken out, saying he wanted them and would have taken them with open arms. Howard told the outlet that multiple family members had called protective services over the years with concerns about Tiffany. Tiffany was arrested and charged accordingly.